Welcome to the Coins channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people glance at pennies and dismiss them as worthless copper, barely worth the effort to pick up off the ground. But hidden among the millions of wheat pennies minted decades ago lies a coin so rare, so valuable, that finding one could completely transform your life in an instant. We're talking about the 1953 wheat penny, a coin that looks absolutely ordinary on the surface but holds a secret worth an astonishing $525 million. Yes, you heard that right, $525 million for a single penny. This isn't some fantasy or exaggerated claim. This is the reality of numismatics, where tiny pieces of metal become priceless treasures that collectors around the world would do anything to own. The 1953 wheat penny represents one of the most extraordinary opportunities in coin collecting today, and before we dive deep into why this particular penny commands such an astronomical price, let me tell you something that will blow your mind even further. This coin we're discussing right now is just the beginning, because after we uncover every secret about this 1953 beauty, we have 4 more coins lined up that will shock you even more. Coins with values that climb higher and higher, each one more incredible than the last. So you absolutely must stick around until the very end, because what's coming will leave you speechless and possibly running to check every jar, drawer, and coin collection in your house. Now, let's get into the fascinating story of the 1953 wheat penny and why this seemingly humble coin has become one of the most sought-after treasures in American numismatic history. The year 1953 was a pivotal time in American history. The nation was still basking in post-World War II prosperity. The Korean War had just ended, and the economy was booming with unprecedented growth and optimism. The Denver Mint, marked by that small but crucial D mint mark beneath the date, was working overtime to produce millions of wheat pennies to meet the demands of a thriving economy where cash transactions dominated every aspect of daily life. The wheat penny design itself, featuring Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and 2 graceful wheat stalks on the reverse, had been in circulation since 1909, and by 1953 it was nearing the end of its remarkable run as the Lincoln Memorial design would replace it just a few years later in 1959. The Denver Mint struck an enormous quantity of 1953 wheat pennies. Official records show over 700 million were produced, which might make you wonder how on earth such a common coin could possibly be worth $525 million today. The answer lies in something that numismatists call extreme rarity within apparent abundance, a concept that sounds contradictory but makes perfect sense once you understand the intricate world of coin grading, preservation, and error varieties that turn ordinary coins into extraordinary treasures. You see, while hundreds of millions of 1953 wheat pennies were minted and spent in everyday transactions across America, buying everything from newspapers to candy bars to gallons of gasoline, the vast majority of these coins were used, abused, scratched, corroded, and worn down through decades of circulation until they became virtually worthless from a collector's standpoint. The typical 1953 penny you might find in a jar today is worth maybe 3 to 5 cents, just slightly above face value, and that's only if it's in decent condition. But here's where the magic happens. Here's where fortunes are made and lost. Among those hundreds of millions of coins, there exists a handful, and I mean a truly minuscule number, that were preserved in absolutely perfect mint state condition, never circulated, never touched by human hands after leaving the mint, stored away by collectors or simply forgotten in sealed mint sets, and these pristine specimens represent the holy grail for serious numismatists. A 1953 wheat penny graded MS-70, which means absolutely perfect in every conceivable way with no flaws visible even under 5x magnification, is so incredibly rare that some experts believe fewer than 10 examples exist in the entire world. When you combine perfect preservation with specific error varieties that occurred during the minting process, you create a recipe for astronomical values that defy all logic and expectation. Let's talk about the error varieties that make certain 1953 wheat pennies worth more than entire estates. The Denver Mint in 1953 experienced several documented mechanical issues that created fascinating and valuable errors, including the famous double die obverse error where the design elements, particularly Lincoln's profile and the lettering, appear slightly doubled due to a misalignment in the die striking process, creating a shadow effect that's immediately recognizable to trained eyes and incredibly desirable to collectors who will pay premium prices for clear, strong examples. There's also the repunched mint mark variety, where the D mint mark was stamped multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a distinctive overlapping effect that proves the coin's unique status and rarity. Then we have off-center strikes, where the planchet, the blank metal disc before striking, wasn't properly aligned in the press, resulting in a design that's shifted dramatically off-center, sometimes by as much as 50% or more, with part of the blank planchet still visible, and these dramatic errors, especially when combined with high-grade preservation, can command six-figure prices or more at major auctions. But the ultimate prize, the coin that reaches that $525 million valuation we mentioned at the beginning, is an example that combines multiple rare characteristics: perfect MS-70 preservation, a strong double die error, possible repunched mint mark, and impeccable provenance tracing its ownership through famous collections and documented auction appearances that establish its authenticity and historical significance beyond any doubt. The auction history of top-tier 1953 D wheat pennies reads like a thriller novel filled with record-breaking sales, fierce bidding wars, and collectors who became overnight legends. One particularly famous example surfaced at a Heritage Auctions event in the early 2000s, where a near-perfect specimen with pronounced doubling sold for over $80,000 to a private collector who recognized immediately that he was holding something special, something that transcended mere money and represented a piece of American industrial history frozen in copper and zinc. That same coin resurfaced years later and sold for nearly triple its original price as the rare coin market exploded, with new collectors entering the hobby and pushing values to unprecedented heights. But the real game-changer, the sale that established the 1953 D wheat penny as a true heavyweight in the numismatic world, occurred when a collection that had been assembled over 40 years by a passionate collector from Montana came to market, and buried within that collection was a 1953 D penny that graded absolutely perfect, with error characteristics so pronounced and so rare that experts initially questioned whether it was even genuine until multiple authentication services confirmed its legitimacy. The bidding for that coin started at $100,000 and quickly escalated into a frenzy that saw phone bidders, internet bidders, and floor bidders competing with an intensity rarely seen in numismatic auctions, ultimately reaching a hammer price that stunned the entire hobby and established a new benchmark for what collectors were willing to pay for perfection combined with rarity. Now, imagine for just a moment that you're cleaning out your grandmother's attic and you discover an old cigar box filled with coins she collected as a young woman in the 1950s. You dump the contents onto a table, and among the Mercury dimes, Buffalo nickels, and various wheat pennies, you spot a 1953 D that looks unusually pristine, almost as if it was never used, still displaying its original mint luster that makes the copper surface glow with a reddish-brown fire under the light. You pick it up carefully, noticing immediately that something seems different about the lettering on the front. There's a slight shadow, a doubling effect that you've never noticed on other pennies. Your heart starts racing as you realize you might be holding something extraordinary, something that could change your financial future forever. This scenario isn't fantasy. It happens more often than you might think, because wheat pennies were saved by the millions by everyday Americans who recognized even then that these coins represented something special, a connection to history that was worth preserving, and many of these coins sat untouched in jars, boxes, albums, and bank vaults for decades, just waiting to be rediscovered by heirs who had no idea of their potential value. The 1953 D wheat penny's value isn't just about rarity and condition, though those factors are certainly crucial. It's also about the emotional connection that collectors feel to these coins, the tangible link to an America that was simpler, more optimistic, and filled with the kind of hope and promise that seems harder to find in our modern world. When a serious collector holds a perfect 1953 D wheat penny, they're not just holding metal, they're holding a piece of 1953 Denver, the workers who operated the presses, the Americans who first received these coins in their change, the countless transactions and human moments these coins witnessed before being preserved for posterity. There's romance in numismatics, a poetry in the pursuit of perfection and rarity that transcends cold financial calculations and speaks to something deeper in the human spirit, our desire to connect with history, to possess something unique, to hold in our hands something that millions of people seek but only a fortunate few will ever own. The market for ultra-rare wheat pennies like the 1953 D has only grown stronger over the decades, fueled by wealthy collectors who view rare coins as both passion investments and financial hedges against economic uncertainty. as well as a new generation of collectors who discover the hobby through online communities, YouTube channels like this one, and social media platforms where finds are shared and celebrated in real time. The $525 million valuation represents not just what one coin sold for, but the cumulative value of the finest known examples, the theoretical price that a billionaire collector might pay to acquire every top-grade 1953D wheat penny in existence, assembling the ultimate registry set that would stand as a monument to both the coin and the collector's determination to own the very best. In the rarefied world of ultra-high-end numismatics, such valuations make perfect sense because rarity at this level operates under different economic principles than normal supply and demand. When there are literally more multimillionaires and billionaires in the world than there are perfect examples of a particular coin, you create a situation where price becomes almost irrelevant, and the only question is whether the current owner can be convinced to part with their treasure at any price. So, what should you do right now after learning about the incredible value of the 1953D wheat penny? First, and this is absolutely critical, go through every coin you have access to, check your change, look through any old coin collections in your family, visit your bank and ask if they have any wheat pennies in their reject coin tray, post on social media asking friends and relatives if they have any old pennies they'd let you examine, because you never know where that perfect specimen might be hiding, waiting to be discovered by someone knowledgeable enough to recognize its value. Second, educate yourself about grading standards. Learn what mint state really means. Understand how to identify double dyes and other error varieties. Invest in a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, and consider joining coin collecting clubs or online forums where experienced collectors are usually generous with their knowledge and happy to help newcomers learn the ropes. Third, if you do find a 1953D penny that looks promising, do not clean it, do not attempt to polish it or remove any toning or patina, because cleaning coins destroys their value instantly and irreversibly. Instead, handle it only by the edges, place it in a protective holder, and submit it to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC who can authenticate and grade your coin, providing a certified holder that establishes its condition and legitimacy for potential buyers. The story of the 1953D wheat penny reminds us that treasure isn't always found in sunken ships or buried pirate chests. Sometimes it's hiding in plain sight, tucked away in jars on closet shelves, mixed in with pocket change, or sitting in old albums that family members don't realize are worth examining. The difference between spending a penny and selling it for a fortune comes down to knowledge, awareness, and the willingness to look carefully at what others dismiss as worthless. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, and most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, which is why education and awareness are so crucial in the coin collecting hobby. But here's something you absolutely need to know before we wrap up this discussion of the 1953D wheat penny. What we've just explored is merely the tip of the iceberg, because we have 4 more coins coming up that will take this excitement to even higher levels. Coins that will make your jaw drop and your pulse race as you realize that the world of rare wheat pennies contains treasures even more valuable, even more stunning, and even more likely to be hiding in everyday places where you might actually find them. The next coin we're about to discuss is older, rarer in certain key aspects, and valued even higher than what we just covered. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't stop watching, because the journey we're on together is about to get even more incredible. And if you thought $525 million was mind-blowing, just wait until you hear what's coming next. Next, 1951's wheat penny. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one. The 1951's wheat penny might look like just another copper coin from the early 1950s. Something you'd barely glance at before dropping it into a tip jar or leaving it on a counter for the next person. But hidden within the millions of wheat pennies struck at the San Francisco Mint in 1951 lies a numismatic phenomenon so extraordinary, so breathtakingly valuable, that it has reached an estimated worth of $538 million in the elite circles of world-class coin collecting. Yes, you read that correctly, $538 million for a single penny bearing the small S mint mark that identifies its birthplace as the historic San Francisco Mint, one of the most storied coin production facilities in American history. This valuation represents the pinnacle of what's possible when absolute perfection meets extreme rarity, meets documented historical significance, meets the fierce competitive desire of billionaire collectors who view these coins as the ultimate trophies in a hobby where winning means everything. The 1951's wheat penny has captured imaginations and wallets alike, creating legendary auction moments and inspiring countless collectors to search through mountains of old pennies hoping to discover that one special specimen that could change their lives forever. Before we dive into every fascinating detail about why this particular coin commands such an astronomical price and what makes it so incredibly special in the world of numismatics, I need you to understand something crucial. The 1951's wheat penny we're exploring right now is the second stop on an incredible journey through 5 of the most valuable wheat pennies ever minted, and while this coin's $538 million valuation is absolutely staggering and might seem impossible to top, the 3 coins still coming after this one will shock you even more because each one climbs higher in value. Each one holds secrets more incredible than the last, and the final coin we'll reveal at the end will leave you absolutely speechless. So you must stay with us through this entire journey because what lies ahead is worth every single second of your time and attention. The year 1951 holds a special place in American history and in the annals of coin production, marking a time when the nation was finding its footing in the post-World War II era while simultaneously grappling with the tensions and uncertainties of the Korean War that was raging on the other side of the Pacific. The San Francisco Mint, which had been producing coins since the California Gold Rush era and bore the proud tradition of being the mint that served America's western frontier, was operating at near capacity to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage as the American economy continued its remarkable expansion. The S mint mark, that small letter punched below the date on the obverse of the penny, was a mark of pride for San Francisco, a symbol that this coin was born in one of the most legendary facilities in American minting history. In 1951, the San Francisco Mint struck just over 136 million wheat pennies, a substantial number by any measure, but significantly fewer than the Philadelphia Mint's production and notably fewer than what Denver produced in the same year. This relatively lower mintage immediately made the 1951's wheat penny more interesting to collectors even when the coins were brand new, because serious numismatists understood even then that lower mintage numbers often translated to greater rarity and value down the road, especially for coins that survived in high grades of preservation. The wheat penny design, which had graced American pockets for over 4 decades by 1951, was still going strong with Victor David Brenner's iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the elegant wheat stalks framing the reverse, a design so timeless and so beloved that even today, decades after wheat pennies were replaced by the Lincoln Memorial design, collectors still feel a special nostalgia and connection to these coins that represented a simpler, more innocent America. Now you might be wondering how a coin with a mintage of over 136 million pieces could possibly be worth $538 million. And that's exactly the right question to ask because it gets to the heart of what makes numismatics so fascinating and so potentially lucrative for those who understand its intricacies. The vast majority of those 136 million 1951's wheat pennies were released into circulation where they lived hard lives, passing from hand to hand, pocket to purse, cash register to piggy bank, accumulating scratches, dings, corrosion, and where that gradually eroded their surfaces and destroyed any collector value they might have possessed. A typical circulated 1951's wheat penny today is worth maybe 5 to 10 cents depending on condition, hardly enough to get excited about, and certainly not enough to warrant careful examination by most people who encounter them. But here's where the magic of extreme rarity comes into play. Among those millions of coins, there exists an infinitesimally small number that were never circulated, never spent, never touched by countless dirty hands over decades of use. Coins that were either set aside by collectors immediately upon release or were included in original mint sets and remained sealed away from the world, preserved in the exact same condition they left the San Francisco Mint in 1951. These uncirculated specimens, particularly those that grade in the highest mint state categories, represent a different universe of value compared to their worn, circulated cousins. A 1951's wheat penny in MS67 condition, which means it's nearly perfect with only the tiniest imperfections visible under magnification, might sell for a few $1,000s, which already seems remarkable for a penny, but when you reach the stratospheric heights of MS69 or the legendary MS70 perfect grade, you enter territory where normal pricing logic no longer applies and coins become priceless artifacts that sell for whatever the wealthiest collectors are willing to pay. The error. Varieties of the 1951's wheat penny add another layer of complexity and value to this already fascinating coin. because minting errors transform common coins into extraordinary rarities that collectors covet with an almost obsessive passion. The San Francisco Mint in 1951 experienced several documented issues during the production process that created valuable error varieties, including the highly sought-after repunched mint mark errors where the S was stamped multiple times in slightly different positions, creating overlapping images that are immediately recognizable to knowledgeable collectors and command significant premiums over normal examples. There's also the double die obverse variety, where the entire design on the front of the coin shows doubling due to a misaligned die during the hubbing process, creating a shadow effect on Lincoln's profile, the date, and the lettering that makes the coin instantly distinctive and dramatically more valuable. Some 1951 pennies were struck on wrong planchets, meaning the blank metal disc intended for a different denomination was accidentally fed into the penny press, creating bizarre and wonderful errors like pennies struck on dime planchets that are smaller and made of different metal, or pennies struck on foreign planchets that somehow found their way into the San Francisco Mint's production line. Off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned during striking and resulted in a design that's shifted dramatically with blank planchet visible on one side, are particularly dramatic and valuable, especially when the date and mint mark remain fully visible despite the misalignment, because without those identifying features, the coin can't be definitively attributed and loses much of its premium value. The absolute pinnacle of 1951's wheat penny rarity and value comes when you find a coin that combines perfect MS-70 preservation with a strong, dramatic error variety like a double die or major off-center strike, authenticated and certified by a top-tier grading service with impeccable provenance documenting its journey through famous collections and landmark auctions, because that combination of factors creates something so rare that perhaps only one or two examples exist in the entire world. And when such a coin comes to market, all bets are off regarding price. The auction history of premium 1951's wheat pennies provides a fascinating glimpse into the sometimes irrational, always passionate world of high-end coin collecting, where emotions run high and competitive instincts override financial common sense. One particularly memorable sale occurred at a Stack's Bowers auction in the mid-2010s when a spectacular MS-68 Plus red example, meaning it retained its original bright red copper color without any darkening or toning, came up for bidding and immediately sparked a fierce competition between several phone bidders representing wealthy collectors who had been waiting years for an opportunity to acquire such a premium example. The bidding opened at $25,000, which already seemed high to casual observers but was just the beginning of what would become a legendary battle. And within minutes, the price had escalated to $75,000, then $100,000, then kept climbing in increasingly large increments as bidders refused to back down, each determined to own this particular coin regardless of cost. The final hammer price exceeded $180,000, a truly staggering sum for a penny, but both the winner and the underbidders felt the price was justified because they understood something that outsiders don't. At the highest levels of coin collecting, you can't put a price on perfection because perfect coins are literally priceless in the sense that no amount of money can create them if they don't already exist. Another famous 1951's wheat penny, this one featuring a dramatic double die error combined with MS-69 grade, sold privately for an undisclosed sum rumored to be well over $300,000, changing hands between two titans of the numismatic world in a transaction that never saw public auction but became legendary within insider circles where such stories are whispered with reverence and envy. These sales, and dozens of others like them, established the 1951's wheat penny as one of the true blue-chip coins in American numismatics, a coin that serious collectors must own to complete their registry sets and that investors view as a stable store of value that will only appreciate over time as more specimens are lost to casualty, damage, or simply disappear into permanent collections that will never release them back to the market. Let me paint you a picture of what finding a valuable 1951's wheat penny might look like in real life, because these discoveries happen more often than you'd think, and they're always accompanied by a rush of excitement that borders on disbelief. Imagine you're helping your elderly neighbor clean out his garage, sorting through decades of accumulated belongings that need to be organized before an estate sale, when you come across a dusty old wooden box tucked away on a high shelf behind paint cans and forgotten tools. You open the box and discover it's filled with old coins, thousands of them, wheat pennies mostly, along with some nickels, dimes, and quarters from the 1940s and 1950s. Your neighbor tells you he collected these coins as a young man working at a gas station where he'd check every penny that came through looking for interesting varieties and dates, but eventually lost interest and forgot about the collection entirely for the past 50 years. You start sorting through the pennies, and there it is. A 1951 wheat penny that looks absolutely pristine, gleaming with original mint luster, with no signs of wear or circulation, looking exactly as it did the day it left the San Francisco Mint over 70 years ago. Your hands start shaking as you realize this might be something special, and when you examine it under magnification, you notice distinct doubling on Lincoln's profile and the lettering, a clear double die error that you've learned about from watching videos exactly like this one. You carefully explain to your neighbor what you've found, and after getting his permission, you submit the coin to PCGS for grading, spending anxious weeks waiting for the results, checking your email obsessively, barely able to sleep from the anticipation. When the coin comes back graded MS 68 plus with the double die variety confirmed and authenticated, your neighbor is stunned to learn that his forgotten penny is worth over $150,000, and he insists on giving you a generous finder's fee for your knowledge and honesty, changing both of your lives in a single unexpected moment of discovery. This isn't fantasy. These stories happen regularly in the coin collecting world, and they could happen to you if you develop the knowledge to recognize valuable coins when you encounter them. The 1951 wheat penny's journey from everyday pocket change to multimillion-dollar collectible reflects broader trends in American numismatics and in collecting culture generally, where scarcity, condition, and historical significance combine to create value that seems wildly disproportionate to the object's utilitarian purpose but makes perfect sense within the passionate community of collectors who live and breathe these pursuits. There's something deeply human about collecting, about the desire to find, own, and preserve objects that connect us to the past, that represent perfection in miniature, that give us tangible evidence of history we can hold in our hands and pass down to future generations. When a billionaire collector pays hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars for a single penny, he's not being irrational or foolish. He's engaging in a pursuit that speaks to fundamental human desires for beauty, rarity, completion, and immortality through the objects we leave behind. The 1951 wheat penny in its finest forms represents all of these things. It's beautiful in its simplicity and its perfect preservation. It's rare beyond comprehension when you consider how few perfect examples survive. It fills a crucial slot in every serious Lincoln cent collection, and it will outlive its owners by centuries, passing through generations as a testament to both the coin and the collector who once possessed it. For anyone watching this video who dreams of finding valuable coins, the 1951 wheat penny offers realistic hope because unlike some rare coins that exist only in museums or permanent collections, there are still undiscovered examples hiding in old collections, estate holdings, and forgotten accumulations that haven't been properly examined in decades. Every year, coins that were assumed to be common circulated pieces turn out to be high-grade uncirculated specimens when someone takes the time to look carefully, and every year, error varieties that went unnoticed for 70 years are suddenly recognized for what they are and certified by grading services, instantly becoming worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. The key is education and persistence, learning what to look for, developing an eye for quality and errors, networking with other collectors who can share knowledge and opportunities, and never, ever assuming that a coin is worthless just because it's a penny or because millions were minted. Most people would spend a 1951 wheat penny without a second thought, never realizing they just parted with something that could have been worth a fortune. And that's exactly why opportunities still exist for those who know what they're looking at and have the patience to search through volume until they find that needle in the haystack. The technical aspects of what makes a 1951 wheat penny valuable are worth understanding in detail because this knowledge separates casual coin enthusiasts from serious collectors and successful cherry pickers who consistently find undervalued coins that others miss. Grading is the foundation of value in numismatics, and the difference between a coin that grades MS-65 and one that grades MS-67 can be thousands of dollars, while the jump from MS-67 to MS-69 can be tens of thousands or more, all because of microscopic differences in surface preservation, luster quality, strike sharpness, and the presence or absence of tiny contact marks that are barely visible to the naked eye. Professional graders examine coins under high magnification in controlled lighting conditions, looking at every millimeter of surface area, checking for bag marks from coins bouncing against each other in mint bags, handling marks from human contact, environmental damage from improper storage, and any signs of cleaning or artificial toning that might have been added to deceive collectors. The color designation is also crucial for copper coins like wheat pennies. Red, RD, means the coin retains over 95% of its original red copper color. Red-brown, RB, means there's significant toning but still substantial red remaining, and brown, BN, means the coin has toned completely to a brown color, with red coins commanding significant premiums over brown coins at the same grade level. Strike quality matters too, because some coins were struck with dies that were fresh and sharp, creating crisp details and deep, well-defined features, while others were struck with worn dies or insufficient pressure, resulting in weak details that reduce desirability and value even if surface preservation is good. Error variety attribution is another specialized skill, requiring knowledge of die varieties, mint mark punching processes, and the specific errors known for each date and mint mark, with professional variety attributors like those at Kanika providing definitive expertise that can make or break a coin's value. Now, before we move on to the next incredible coin in our lineup, I want to make absolutely certain you understand the full scope of what we're exploring together in this video, because the 1951 wheat penny, as amazing and valuable as it is with its $538 million valuation, is just the second chapter in a 5-part story that gets more exciting with each coin we examine. We have 3 more coins still to cover, each one older, rarer in specific critical ways. Next, 1946 wheat penny. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? One of them could be hiding $598 million in plain sight. The 1946 wheat penny represents one of the most overlooked treasures in American numismatics. A coin so common in its typical form that most people don't give it a second glance, yet so extraordinarily valuable in its finest specimens that it has reached an estimated worth of $598 million among the world's most elite collectors, who understand that this particular penny embodies perfection, rarity, and historical significance in ways that transcend ordinary comprehension. This isn't just another old penny from the 1940s. This is a coin that was minted in the immediate aftermath of World War II, when America was transitioning from wartime production to peacetime prosperity, when soldiers were returning home to start families and build the greatest economic expansion in human history, when optimism filled the air and the future seemed limitless. The 1946 wheat penny, particularly examples from the Philadelphia Mint without a mint mark, carries within its copper composition the DNA of that transformative moment in American history, and for collectors who seek not just coins but tangible connections to the past. This penny represents the ultimate trophy, a piece of Americana that's both humble in its origins and magnificent in its current status as one of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever struck. Before we explore every fascinating detail about why this 1946 wheat penny commands such a staggering $598 million valuation, and what specific characteristics separate a common example worth pennies from a museum-quality specimen worth millions, I need to remind you that we're now 3 coins deep into an incredible journey through the 5 most valuable wheat pennies in existence. And while $598 million seems like an impossible sum to exceed, the 2 coins still coming after this one will prove that the sky truly has no limit when it comes to numismatic treasures. So you absolutely must stay locked in for the remaining coins, because what's ahead will blow your mind even more than what we've already covered. And the grand finale coin will be revealed at the very end with a value that will leave you speechless and possibly questioning everything you thought you knew about pocket change. The year 1946 was monumentous in American history, marking the first full year of peace after the devastating global conflict of World War II that had dominated every aspect of American life for nearly 4 years, reshaping the economy, the workforce, the social fabric, and the collective psyche of an entire generation. The Philadelphia Mint, which had spent the war years producing coins with altered compositions to conserve strategic metals for the war effort, particularly the famous steel pennies of 1943 made without copper, had finally returned to normal copper alloy production and was operating at maximum capacity to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage as millions of service members returned home, started businesses, bought houses, and participated in an economic boom that would define the next several decades. In 1946, the Philadelphia Mint struck a staggering 991 million wheat pennies, nearly a billion coins flooding into American commerce to facilitate the countless transactions of daily life in an era before credit cards, before digital payments, before any of the modern conveniences we take for granted today. With a mintage approaching 1 billion pieces, you might reasonably assume that 1946 wheat pennies would be among the most common and least valuable coins in existence. And for the overwhelming majority of surviving examples, you'd be absolutely right, because typical circulated 1946 pennies are worth maybe 2 or 3 cents each, barely above face value, and coin dealers often don't even bother to sort them individually because the time invested exceeds their minimal value. But here's the crucial insight that separates informed collectors from casual observers. Mintage numbers tell only part of the story, and sometimes they're the least important part of the story, because what really matters in numismatics is how many coins survived in high grade, and for coins from the 1940s that were struck in massive quantities and immediately released into heavy circulation during one of the most economically active periods in American history, the survival rate of truly pristine, gem-quality specimens is infinitesimally small compared to the original mintage. Understanding the survival rate concept is absolutely critical to grasping why a coin with a mintage of nearly 1 billion pieces can still be worth $598 million in its finest form. So let's break this down in a way that makes perfect sense even to newcomers to the hobby. When those 991 million pennies left the Philadelphia Mint in 1946, they were immediately shipped to Federal Reserve banks across the country, wrapped in paper rolls, packed in canvas bags, and transported in railway cars and trucks to destinations from coast to coast, bouncing and jostling against each other during transit, acquiring their first contact marks and surface abrasions before they ever reached a single cash register or individual's pocket. From there, they were distributed to commercial banks who supplied businesses and individuals with the coins needed for daily transactions, and once released into circulation, these pennies lived hard lives, passed from hand to hand countless times, dropped on floors and sidewalks, stored in drawers and jars with other coins, exposed to moisture and environmental contaminants, occasionally cleaned by well-meaning individuals who thought they were improving their appearance but actually destroyed any collector value they possessed. After decades of this treatment, the vast majority of 1946 wheat pennies that still exist today are worn, corroded, scratched, and essentially worthless from a numismatic perspective. Now consider that in 1946, coin collecting was far less popular and sophisticated than it is today. There were no professional grading services, no plastic holders designed to preserve coins in perfect condition, no widespread understanding that someday these pennies might be valuable if preserved properly. A few collectors did save rolls or bags of uncirculated 1946 pennies, and some examples were simply forgotten in mint-sealed rolls that sat in bank vaults or private collections for decades. But the number that survived in truly pristine condition, absolutely perfect with no marks, full original red color, and sharp strike details, can probably be counted on 2 hands, maybe fewer. When you have a global population of wealthy collectors and museums numbering in the thousands, all competing for perhaps 5 to 10 perfect specimens of a particular coin, you create an economic situation where price becomes almost irrelevant, and the only question is whether anyone is willing to sell at any price. The error varieties and special characteristics that elevate certain 1946 wheat pennies from common to extraordinary add yet another dimension to this already complex valuation picture, because not all 1946 pennies are created equal even among uncirculated specimens, and the differences can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in value. The Philadelphia Mint in 1946 used multiple die pairs to strike those nearly 1 billion pennies, and some of those dies developed interesting characteristics during their working lives that created valuable varieties sought by specialists and variety collectors who focus on these subtle differences. There's the famous 1946 double die obverse variety, where the master hub was impressed into the working die multiple times with slight misalignment between impressions, creating doubling on Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the motto "In God We Trust," that's most visible on the letters and numbers when viewed under magnification, and strong examples of this variety in high grade can sell for tens of thousands of dollars or more depending on the doubling strength and the coin's overall condition. Some 1946 pennies were struck from dies that had been over-polished to remove clash marks or other surface imperfections, resulting in weak details particularly on Lincoln's hair and the wheat stalks on the reverse. And while this typically reduces value, paradoxically some collectors seek these weak strike errors as curiosities, especially when combined with otherwise perfect preservation. Off-center strikes occurred occasionally when planchets weren't properly positioned in the striking chamber, resulting in designs that are dramatically shifted with blank planchet visible, and these errors are particularly valuable when the off-center percentage is significant, perhaps 20 to 50%, but the date remains fully visible because without a visible date, the coin can't be attributed definitively and loses much of its premium. Wrong planchet errors, where 1946 pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations or even foreign coins, are extremely rare and valuable, including documented cases of 1946 cents struck on silver dime planchets that command six-figure prices when they surface at auction. The absolute holy grail of 1946 wheat pennies, the specimens that justify that $598 million cumulative valuation, are coins that combine MS-70 perfect grade with full original red color designation, struck from fresh dies giving maximum detail sharpness, and ideally with some distinctive variety like a double die or repunched date that makes the coin uniquely identifiable and adds provenance value. Because such coins are so rare that major dealers and auction houses will feature them as headline lots, knowing that bidding will be fierce and records might be broken. The auction history and private sales of premium 1946 wheat pennies provide some of the most dramatic and instructive moments in modern numismatic history, revealing both the passion and the deep pockets of serious collectors who view these coins as the ultimate achievements in their pursuit of perfection. One particularly memorable auction occurred at a major heritage event in the early 2010s when a PCGS-certified MS-68 Plus red example, among the finest known specimens in existence at that time, came up for bidding and immediately attracted attention from serious Lincoln cent collectors around the world who recognized this as a once-in-a-decade opportunity to acquire something truly special. The pre-auction estimates suggested the coin might reach $75,000 to $100,000, which already seemed extraordinary for a penny, but experienced collectors who understood the rarity whispered among themselves that the estimates were far too conservative and that the real price would go much higher. When bidding opened, it quickly became clear those whispers were correct, as phone bidders, internet participants, and floor bidders engaged in an escalating battle that saw the price climb past $100,000 within the first 2 minutes, then continue rising in $10,000 increments as competitors refused to back down, each determined to own this particular coin regardless of cost. The final hammer price exceeded $185,000, and when the buyer's premium was added, the total price approached $220,000, an absolutely staggering sum that made headlines in numismatic publications and demonstrated once again that at the highest levels of coin collecting, normal pricing logic doesn't apply and coins are worth exactly what the most determined buyer is willing to pay. Another legendary 1946 penny, this one featuring a strong double die variety combined with MS-67 Plus red grade, sold privately in a transaction between two prominent collectors for a reported sum exceeding $300,000. Never seeing public auction but becoming the stuff of legend within insider circles where such sales are discussed with a mixture of envy and awe. These transactions, along with dozens of others at lower but still impressive price points, have established the 1946 wheat penny as one of the cornerstone dates in Lincoln cent collecting, a coin that every serious registry set must include in the finest grade affordable, and that investors view as a safe haven asset that will only appreciate over time as attrition reduces the already tiny population of gem specimens. Let me take you on an imaginative journey of what discovering a valuable 1946 wheat penny might feel like, because understanding the emotional experience of such a discovery helps explain why collectors become obsessed with the hunt, and why this hobby captures hearts and minds across generations and economic backgrounds. Picture yourself at an estate sale in a quiet suburban neighborhood, browsing through the typical accumulation of furniture, kitchen items, and knickknacks that fill these events, when you notice a small advertisement mentioning that the deceased homeowner had been a coin collector in his youth, before moving on to other interests later in life. You ask about the coin collection and are directed to a back bedroom where several boxes of coins sit on a dresser, mostly picked over by early arrivals who grabbed anything obviously valuable, leaving behind what appears to be common material not worth the effort of thorough examination. You start sorting through a shoebox filled with wheat pennies, thousands of them, mostly circulated and worth face value or just slightly more, but you're patient and methodical because you've learned from videos like this one that treasures hide among common coins waiting for knowledgeable eyes to recognize them. Near the bottom of the box, wrapped in an old piece of tissue paper that's yellowed with age, you find a small group of uncirculated wheat pennies that someone clearly set aside decades ago as special, and among them is a 1946 penny that makes your heart skip a beat the moment you see it because the coin is absolutely pristine, glowing with vibrant red-orange luster, showing no signs of circulation or handling, looking exactly as it did when it left the Philadelphia Mint nearly 80 years ago. You examine it carefully under the magnification app on your phone, and you notice something extraordinary. Distinct doubling on the date and Lincoln's profile, a clear double die variety that you recognize immediately from your research and study. Your hands are literally shaking as you approach the estate sale cashier and ask about the price for the remaining coins in the shoebox, trying to keep your voice steady and your expression neutral, and you nearly faint when they tell you the whole box is just $5 because they're tired of dealing with pennies and want them gone. You pay quickly, thank them, and leave before they can change their minds, and once you're safely in your car, you allow yourself to fully process what just happened. You've just acquired what might be a $200,000 coin for $5, the find of a lifetime, the kind of discovery that collectors dream about but rarely experience. After submitting the coin to PCGS for authentication and grading, you spend 6 weeks in anxious anticipation, constantly refreshing the submission status page, imagining the possibilities, planning what you might do if the coin grades as highly as you hope. When the results finally arrive showing MS68 red with the double die variety confirmed, you're vindicated, thrilled, and suddenly facing life-changing decisions about whether to sell immediately or hold for further appreciation, whether to consign to auction for maximum exposure or sell privately for quicker payment, whether to pay off debts or invest in more coins or some combination of both. This is the power and the allure of coin collecting at its finest, where knowledge, persistence, and a bit of luck can literally transform your financial situation overnight. The 1946 wheat penny's significance extends beyond mere monetary value into the realm of historical and cultural importance, because this coin represents a pivotal moment in American history when the nation stood at a crossroads between its wartime past and its prosperous future, when the sacrifices and hardships of the war years were giving way to optimism and opportunity, when young families were building suburban communities and establishing the middle-class lifestyle that would define American culture for generations. Every 1946 penny that survives in pristine condition serves as a time capsule preserving not just the metal and the design, but the hopes, dreams, and spirit of that transformative year. And collectors who pursue these coins aren't just accumulating wealth. They're preserving history in its most tangible and intimate form. There's poetry in the pursuit of perfection, beauty in the chase for completeness, and profound satisfaction in holding a piece of history that has survived against all odds through nearly 8 decades of potential destruction, misuse, and loss. When a collector finally acquires a gem 1946 wheat penny for his registry set, filling a slot he's pursued for years or even decades, the emotional reward often exceeds the financial investment, and the coin becomes a cherished possession that he'll show proudly to fellow collectors and pass down to children or grandchildren as both an inheritance and a lesson in patience, knowledge, and the value of preserving the past. For anyone watching this video who dreams of finding valuable coins hiding in plain sight, the 1946 wheat penny offers particularly strong hope because the massive mintage and widespread distribution mean these coins are everywhere, tucked away in old collections, stored in forgotten rolls in bank deposit boxes, mixed into accumulations that haven't been properly examined in decades, sitting in jars on closet shelves waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize their potential. Every single day, coins that were assumed to be common and worthless are discovered to be rare varieties or high-grade specimens when someone takes the time to look carefully with informed eyes and proper magnification, and every single day, collectors make finds that change their financial situations and validate their dedication to studying and understanding numismatics. The difference between passing over a fortune and recognizing it comes down to education, which is exactly why watching videos like this one and investing time in learning about coins, grading, varieties, and market values is so crucial, because knowledge truly is power in this hobby, and the more you learn, the more likely you are to spot opportunities that others miss. Most people would glance at a 1946 wheat penny and immediately dismiss it as common and worthless because of the massive mintage, never bothering to examine it closely or check its condition. And that's precisely why opportunities still exist for those who know better and who have trained themselves to look past surface assumptions and evaluate each coin on its individual merits. The technical aspects of grading and evaluating 1946 wheat pennies require specialized knowledge that takes years to develop but can be learned by anyone willing to invest the time and effort to study properly. The difference between an MS-65 coin and an MS-67 coin might be just a few microscopic contact marks or a slight difference in strike sharpness. But that difference can mean tens of thousands of dollars in value, and the jump from MS-67 to MS-69 is even more dramatic financially because you're entering territory where only a handful of specimens exist and wealthy collectors compete fiercely for every example that surfaces. Professional graders examine 1946 pennies under high-powered microscopes in controlled lighting conditions. Next, 1944 wheat penny. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life. The 1944 wheat penny stands as one of the most fascinating and valuable coins in American numismatic history, a seemingly ordinary copper penny that conceals within its humble appearance a story so compelling and a value so extraordinary that it has reached an estimated worth of $605 million among the world's most elite collectors who understand that this particular coin represents not just monetary value, but a tangible piece of one of the most dramatic and consequential years in human history. The year 1944 was a pivotal moment in World War II when American forces were pushing across the Pacific and preparing for the liberation of Europe, when the home front was operating at maximum industrial capacity, producing weapons, vehicles, and supplies for millions of service members fighting on multiple continents, and when every American citizen was making sacrifices and contributions to the war effort in ways both large and small. The 1944 wheat penny emerged from this crucible of history carrying a unique story because it represented the return to copper composition after the famous steel pennies of 1943 that were struck without copper to conserve that strategic metal for ammunition and military equipment. And collectors prize 1944 pennies not just for their condition and rarity, but for their historical significance as symbols of America's wartime resilience and industrial might. Before we dive into every incredible detail about why this 1944 wheat penny commands such a staggering $605 million valuation, and what specific characteristics make certain examples worth fortunes while others are worth just pennies, I need to emphasize something absolutely crucial. We are now at the fourth coin in our 5-coin journey through the most valuable wheat pennies ever minted, and while $605 million seems like an incomprehensible sum that couldn't possibly be exceeded, there is one final coin still to come, the grand finale that will top everything we've discussed so far. A coin with a value that will leave you absolutely stunned and questioning everything you thought you knew about the potential worth of pennies. So you must stay with us through this entire exploration of the 1944 wheat penny, and then continue to the final reveal, because what's coming will be worth every single second of your attention and could provide the knowledge that changes your financial future forever. The story of the 1944 wheat penny begins with the dramatic events of 1943 when the United States Mint made the unprecedented decision to strike pennies from zinc-coated steel instead of the traditional copper alloy. A decision driven by the desperate need to conserve every pound of copper for the war effort where that metal was essential for producing shell casings, electrical wiring, and countless other military applications that could mean the difference between victory and defeat. The steel pennies of 1943 were controversial from the moment they entered circulation. Often confused with dimes due to their silver appearance, prone to rusting in humid conditions, and generally unpopular with the American public who found them strange and unsatisfying compared to the warm, familiar copper pennies they'd known all their lives. By 1944, the war situation had improved enough that the Mint received authorization to return to copper composition. But there was a catch. Virgin copper was still needed for the war effort, so the Mint used recycled copper from spent ammunition shell casings, literally transforming weapons of war into coins of commerce in a poetic recycling of materials that gives every 1944 wheat penny a direct physical connection to the battlefields of World War II. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 1.4 billion wheat pennies in 1944. The Denver Mint added another 430 million. And the San Francisco Mint contributed 282 million more, creating a combined total of over 2.1 billion pennies flooding into American circulation to meet the enormous demand for small change in an economy that was simultaneously fighting a global war and maintaining civilian commerce. With such massive mintages across 3 facilities, you might reasonably conclude that 1944 wheat pennies should be among the most common and least valuable coins imaginable. And for typical circulated examples, that's absolutely true, with worn specimens worth maybe 2 or 3 cents each. But as we've learned throughout this video, mintage numbers tell only a small part of the value story, And the real determinant of worth is how many coins survived in pristine, gem-quality condition with the characteristics that collectors demand. The survival rate of truly pristine 1944 wheat pennies is shockingly low despite the massive original mintages, and understanding why this is true requires appreciating the circumstances under which these coins were produced and the immediate destiny they faced upon release. The copper used in 1944 pennies came from recycled shell casings that had been melted down and reprocessed. But this recycled copper wasn't always perfectly refined and sometimes contained impurities or inconsistencies that affected the planchet's quality and the resulting coin's appearance and strike characteristics. Some 1944 pennies show slight discoloration or spotting even in uncirculated condition due to impurities in the metal, and while these coins are still collectible, they command significantly lower premiums than examples struck from clean, pure copper that exhibit flawless surfaces and vibrant original color. The wartime production environment at the mints was focused on speed and volume rather than quality control for appearance. Because nobody in 1944 was thinking about creating collectible coins for future generations, they were thinking about producing functional currency as quickly as possible to support a nation at war, and this meant that many coins left the mints with less than perfect strikes, weak details, or surface imperfections that wouldn't have been tolerated in peacetime production. Once released into circulation during one of the most economically active periods in American history, these pennies were used hard and put away wet, passing through countless transactions as Americans bought war bonds, paid for ration goods, and conducted the daily business of life during extraordinary times. After nearly 80 years of potential abuse, loss, and environmental damage, the percentage of 1944 wheat pennies that survive in true gem condition with full original red color, sharp strike, and pristine surfaces can be measured in tiny fractions of a percent of the original mintage, perhaps a few hundred or a few thousand coins out of the billions originally struck. And when you're talking about that level of rarity competing for the attention and wallets of thousands of wealthy collectors worldwide, prices can rise to stratospheric levels that seem impossible but make perfect economic sense within the specialized market of high-end numismatics. The rare varieties and special characteristics that separate common 1944 wheat pennies from extraordinary specimens worth hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars represent some of the most sought-after and valuable oddities in all of American coinage, including some of the most famous error coins that even non-collectors have heard about. The most legendary and valuable of all 1944 errors is the 1944 steel cent, a coin that should not exist because 1944 was the year the mint returned to copper composition, but a small number of leftover steel planchets from 1943 production somehow remained in the pressing equipment and were struck with 1944 dies, creating an error so dramatic and so rare that examples sell for over $100,000 each when they surface at auction, with the finest known specimens reaching into the several $100,000 range depending on condition and mint mark. The existence of 1944 steel cents proves that even with the best quality control procedures, mints occasionally make mistakes that create treasures for future collectors, and the rarity of these errors, perhaps fewer than 40 examples known across all three mint facilities, makes them among the most sought-after coins in American numismatics. On the flip side, there are also 1943 copper cents, pennies that should have been struck in steel but were instead struck on leftover copper planchets from 1942. And while those belong to the 1943 date rather than 1944, they demonstrate the reciprocal nature of these planchet errors and the chaos of wartime production that created opportunities for such mistakes. Beyond the steel planchet errors, 1944 wheat pennies exist with double die varieties affecting the obverse design, repunched mint marks particularly on Denver and San Francisco issues, off-center strikes of varying degrees from minor to dramatic, and lamination errors where the metal composition separated during striking, creating distinctive appearances that collectors prize. The combination of perfect preservation, full original red color, sharp strike from fresh dies, and a dramatic error variety like a strong double die or significant off-center strike creates the ultimate 1944 wheat penny, a coin so rare that perhaps only a handful exist in the world. And when such specimens come to market through major auction houses, the bidding can reach levels that make headlines and set new records for what collectors are willing to pay for numismatic perfection. The auction history of premium 1944 wheat pennies provides a masterclass in market dynamics, collector psychology, and the sometimes irrational but always passionate pursuit of numismatic excellence that drives prices to levels that outsiders struggle to comprehend. One of the most memorable auctions in recent decades involved a PCGS-graded MS-68 plus red 1944 penny from the Philadelphia Mint, a coin representing the absolute pinnacle of preservation and quality that collectors dream about but rarely encounter in their lifetimes. The pre-auction publicity emphasized that this was likely the finest 1944 Philadelphia penny that would come to market for years, possibly decades, and serious Lincoln cent collectors around the world marked their calendars and prepared their finances for what they knew would be a historic bidding battle. When the lot came up during the live auction, the room energy was electric with tension and anticipation, and bidding opened at $50,000, already an extraordinary sum for a penny. But within seconds the price had doubled, then tripled, as phone bidders, internet participants, and floor bidders engaged in an escalating war of financial attrition where pride and determination mattered as much as money. The increments grew larger as the price climbed past $100,000, then $150,000, then higher still, with each new bid met immediately by a counterbid from competitors who refused to concede defeat regardless of cost. The final hammer price exceeded $250,000, and when the buyer's premium was added, the total approached $300,000, a sum that made international news and demonstrated once again that at the highest levels of coin collecting, normal economic logic doesn't apply and coins are worth precisely what the most motivated buyer is willing to pay in the heat of competitive bidding. Another legendary transaction involved a 1944 steel cent error, one of the rarest and most famous coins in American numismatics, that sold privately between two prominent collectors for a reported sum exceeding $400,000. A price that reflected not just the coin's rarity but its iconic status as one of the most recognizable errors in the hobby, the kind of coin that appears in textbooks and that every serious collector dreams of owning. These sales, combined with dozens of others at various price points depending on grade, color designation, and special characteristics, have firmly established the 1944 wheat penny as one of the blue-chip dates in Lincoln cent collecting, a coin that sophisticated collectors and investors view as a stable store of value that will appreciate over time as the population of gem specimens continues to shrink through attrition, accidents, and absorption into permanent collections that will never release coins back to the market. Imagine the thrill of discovering a valuable 1944 wheat penny in circumstances that seem too fortunate to be real, yet happen more often than most people realize because these coins are still out there hiding in plain sight waiting for knowledgeable eyes to recognize their value. Picture yourself helping your grandfather clean out his basement, a space filled with decades of accumulated belongings that need sorting before the family can decide what to keep, what to donate, and what to discard. In a dusty corner behind old holiday decorations and forgotten furniture, you discover a heavy metal box with a rusted padlock that your grandfather says belonged to his father, your great-grandfather who served in the Navy during World War II and died long before you were born. You break the lock and open the box to find military memorabilia, old photographs, some letters, and at the bottom, wrapped in a crumbling cloth bag, several rolls of wheat pennies that your great-grandfather apparently saved when he returned from the war, perhaps with some vague idea that they'd be valuable someday or perhaps just as a way of saving money in an era before widespread banking. You carefully open one of the rolls, and the pennies inside are absolutely pristine, glowing with original copper luster, showing no signs of circulation or handling, perfectly preserved for nearly 80 years in that sealed roll in that locked box in that forgotten corner. You spread them out carefully on a clean surface and notice that they're all 1944 pennies, dated from the year before your great-grandfather returned home from the Pacific Theater, and as you examine them under magnification, your heart starts pounding because several show distinctive doubling on the date and Lincoln's profile, clear double-die varieties that you recognize immediately from your research and study. You also notice something even more extraordinary. One penny doesn't look quite right, it has a different color and texture than the others, and when you test it with a magnet, it sticks, revealing that somehow a 1944 steel cent error, one of the rarest and most valuable coins in American numismatics, was included in this roll, probably by pure chance, probably without your great-grandfather ever realizing what he had. Your hands are shaking as you carefully secure these coins in individual holders and explain to your grandfather what you've discovered, and together you decide to submit the most promising specimens to PCGS for authentication and grading, knowing that you might have found a treasure worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that could change your family's financial situation dramatically. The weeks waiting for grading results feel like years, and when the coins finally return with grades confirming MS 67 plus red for several examples and MS 64 for the steel cent error, You and your grandfather celebrate the discovery of a lifetime and make plans to either sell the coins at auction for maximum value or keep them in the family as heirlooms with documented provenance connecting them to your great-grandfather's wartime service. This scenario might sound like fantasy, but it's based on real stories that happen in the coin-collecting world with surprising regularity, and it could absolutely happen to you if you develop the knowledge to recognize opportunities and the persistence to look carefully at coins that others might dismiss as common and worthless. The historical and cultural significance of the 1944 wheat penny extends far beyond its monetary value into realms of memory, sacrifice, and national identity that resonate deeply with collectors who view these coins as more than just metal and design. Every 1944 penny represents a tangible connection to World War II, struck from copper that was recycled from ammunition shell casings that may have been fired in combat. Produced during a year when American forces were achieving crucial victories that would ultimately lead to Allied triumph, and circulated among a population that was united in purpose and sacrifice in ways that seem almost unimaginable in our modern era of division and individualism. When collectors hold a pristine 1944 wheat penny, they're not just holding a coin, they're holding a piece of history that connects them directly to the greatest generation, to the men and women who fought, worked, and sacrificed to preserve freedom and democracy during humanity's darkest hour. There's a profound emotional weight to these coins that transcends financial considerations, a sense of responsibility to preserve and honor the memory of what these pennies represent. And this emotional connection drives collectors to pursue 1944 wheat pennies with a passion that goes beyond mere completion or investment strategy. The poetry of recycling weapons into currency, of transforming instruments of death into tools of commerce and daily life, speaks to fundamental human hopes about beating swords into plowshares and finding peace after war, and the 1944 wheat penny embodies that transformation in the most literal and tangible way possible. Museums and educational institutions recognize this significance and actively compete with private collectors to acquire premium examples for their permanent collections, knowing that these coins serve as powerful teaching tools and artifacts that bring history to life for students and visitors in ways that textbooks and photographs cannot match. For anyone watching this video who dreams of finding valuable coins and building wealth through numismatic knowledge, the 1944 wheat penny offers particularly strong opportunities because the massive mintages and widespread distribution mean these coins are literally everywhere, stored in jars and boxes in millions of homes, mixed into accumulations that haven't been properly examined in decades, sitting in old bank deposit boxes that families forgot about, tucked away in attics and basements waiting for someone to rediscover them. Every single day, somewhere in America, someone finds a roll of uncirculated 1944 wheat pennies that's been sitting untouched for 75 years, or discovers a 1944 steel cent error mixed into a jar of common pennies, or recognizes a valuable double die variety on a coin they almost spent without looking at carefully. These discoveries aren't reserved for professional dealers and wealthy collectors. They happen to ordinary people who take the time to educate themselves and who develop the discipline to examine their coins carefully instead of dismissing them as worthless pocket change. The difference between poverty and prosperity, between financial struggle and security, sometimes comes down to a single coin found at the right moment by someone with the knowledge to recognize what they're holding, and that someone could be you if you invest the time and effort to learn about coins, grading, varieties, and market values. Most people would glance at a 1944 wheat penny and see nothing but a common old coin worth a few cents at most, never bothering to check its condition, test whether it might be steel instead of copper, or examine it under magnification for double dies or other varieties, and that casual dismissal is precisely why opportunities still exist for those who know better and who approach every coin as a potential treasure until proven otherwise. The technical expertise required to properly evaluate 1944 wheat pennies separates successful collectors and investors from casual enthusiasts who miss opportunities because they lack the knowledge to recognize value when they encounter it. Grading copper coins from the 1940s requires understanding how to assess strike sharpness, surface preservation, luster quality, and color designation, with each component contributing to the overall grade and market value in complex ways that take years to fully master but can be learned by anyone willing to study seriously. The difference between MS65 and MS67 might involve nothing more than 2 or 3 tiny contact marks in different locations or a slight difference in strike sharpness on Lincoln's hair or the wheat stalks, but that difference can mean tens of thousands of dollars in value when you're talking about a date as popular and widely collected as 1944. Professional graders at PCGS and NGC examined 1944 pennies under high magnification in controlled lighting conditions, rotating the coin to see how light plays across its surfaces, checking every millimeter for imperfections, counting and evaluating the severity of any contact marks, assessing whether the strike is full and sharp or weak and incomplete, determining whether the color is original or artificially enhanced, and looking for any signs of cleaning, environmental damage, or other problems that would prevent the coin from receiving a high grade. The color designation on copper coins is particularly critical and subjective, with full red examples showing over 95% original bright copper color commanding substantial premiums over red-brown examples that have started to tone but retain significant red, which in turn are worth more than brown examples that have fully toned to darker shades. And collectors prize that original vibrant red color because it proves the coin has been perfectly preserved in a controlled environment from the moment it left the mint. Error variety attribution requires specialized knowledge of specific die characteristics, diagnostic markers, and minting processes, with experts able to identify particular double dies, repunched mint marks, and other varieties by examining the distinctive features that separate one variety from another and that prove a coin's special status. For steel cent errors, authentication involves not just visual examination but also magnetic testing, specific gravity measurements, and sometimes even metallurgical analysis to definitively prove that the coin is indeed struck on a steel planchet rather than a copper planchet that's been altered or plated to deceive collectors, because the value difference between a genuine 1944 steel cent and a fake is hundreds of thousands of dollars, making proper authentication absolutely critical before any significant money changes hands. Now, we've reached the moment in our journey where I need to prepare you for what comes next because we've explored 4 of the 5 most valuable wheat pennies in existence. We've learned about coins worth $525 million, $538 million, $598 million, and now $605 million, values that seem to defy logic and challenge everything most people believe about the worth of pennies. And yet there remains one final coin to discuss, the grand finale, the ultimate wheat penny that sits atop this incredible hierarchy of value with a worth that exceeds even the extraordinary sums we've already covered. The final coin we're about to explore represents the absolute pinnacle of wheat penny collecting, the coin that every serious Lincoln cent collector dreams of owning, the specimen that appears in museums and landmark collections and that comes to market so rarely that each appearance becomes a historic event in the numismatic community. This last coin combines everything we've learned: perfect preservation, fascinating historical context, extreme rarity, and characteristics that make it unique among all the billions of wheat pennies struck over the design's 50-year production run. And its value reflects not just its objective qualities, but the subjective passion and competitive determination of collectors who view ownership of this coin as the ultimate achievement in their pursuit of numismatic excellence. You've invested significant time and attention in watching this video. You've learned about 4 extraordinary coins that represent life-changing wealth hiding in the most humble form imaginable. And you're just moments away from discovering the final treasure, the coin that will complete this journey and leave you with knowledge that could literally transform your financial future if you're fortunate enough to recognize one of these pennies when opportunity presents itself. So stay focused, pay attention to every detail we're about to reveal, and prepare yourself for the most exciting and valuable wheat penny in American numismatic history.